Yes, welcome to the Biz Communication Show. I'm your host, Bill Lampton, the Biz Communication Guy, inviting you to once again join my conversation with a business communication expert. Today, it's a privilege to welcome Dorine Rivers, also known as River to her friends. Dorine literally grew up on North and South American rivers, rafting wild whitewater rapids, basking in the sun, and sleeping under a canopy of brilliant constellations. But after that, she went to work. So let's talk about that. River has an undergraduate degree in creative writing and a PhD in business management, along with investment banking and general contractor licenses, and a few other degrees and certifications. She is the CEO of Alpha 81 Incorporated, an Arizona based firm successfully supporting corporate innovations, expansions, and exits in several industries. Her award winning writing, photography, and graphic design have been published in books, magazines, newspapers, brochures, and advertisements. Quite a versatile professional. Her everyday motto, I love it, and you will too. Her everyday motto for a living is based on Helen Keller's quote: "Life is either a daring adventure or nothing." Join me now in welcoming Dorine Rivers. Hello, Dorine.
Hello, Bill. I want to thank you first and foremost for inviting me to be on this interview with you. I met you a couple of months ago, and you were immediately a friend to me, and someone that I could talk to, communicate with on many levels. And just as a human being, I just think you are fabulous.
That's quite a grand compliment, which I appreciate. And I remember our meeting. We've had some good conversations since, and that's why I knew that you would be an excellent guest for us on the Biz Communication Show. One of the ways I'd like to start, Doreen, is to realize the fact that you have been a very creative person in the business arena for a long time. I read about an unusual business approach you took at 8 years old. Describe that for us, please.
That I did start my first business when I was 8. A lot of the kids had lemonade stands, and I just thought our neighborhood does not need another lemonade stand. So I was trying to think of something else. And I came up with taking Kool-Aid and putting it in those old metal trays and freezing them with toothpicks in them. And I called them cupsicles and sold them for 2 cents a piece. In no time, the lemonade stands were out of business. And I was up and running. And then the next year, I added some other things like a puppet show and buying candy wholesale and selling it retail. And it sort of went from there.
And you really have kept up your business innovation. One of the things I see in your credentials is that you are a project manager. I mentioned to you in a phone conversation that of all the speaking engagements I've had, I do think that the liveliest audience, the most receptive audience I ever faced, was a group of project managers. I just found it so easy to engage with them, get response, get participation, which I love because one way communication is not nearly as powerful as two way, as we know. And I also got some great ideas from the group. When you're working with a company as a project manager, I'm quite sure that you run into some communication gaps that you have to take care of. Name, please, maybe one or even two communication gaps that you frequently find in companies that you work with, and how you go about solving either one or both of them, whichever you want to mention.
Well, there are so many because it all comes down to communication, and everything, as you know, is also a project which needs to be managed, uh, and so they go hand in hand. There was a company that I consulted with once who they had they were starting a new solar energy company, and they had created a call center, And what was happening was that there were a lot of calls that were not communicated properly, either from the person on the incoming or the person on the outgoing call. And so all the appointments got messed up, and people would show up places where nobody was home, and they would duplicate appointments. And because of that, the company had a most difficult time getting launched, because the communication from getting the calls in and where the scheduling was happening out to the field wasn't working.
There was a lot of confusion, wasn't there?
There was so much confusion, and they almost lost a whole company. But they recognized the problem. We got it solved and put in place some systems and processes that made it easier to communicate what needed to happen out to the customer, and then asking the customer questions so it came back and the field could respond.
Thank you. I would imagine that a project manager is one who helps a company with something that's very closely related to communication, and that's their time management. You give them schedules, and if you manage a project, you have to move it forward according to deadlines, don't you?
Well, that's true. And there are a lot of, thankfully, online programs now that make it easy to do that, where you put in start dates and end dates. You have Gantt charts that show how long that goes. You show where things might cross over. Those are all visual forms of communication. And then some of these really great programs, they have reminders that pop up, which again communicate to you, where you can communicate to your team what has to happen that day or that week. We have so many tools now, there's really no reason not to communicate properly, if you just remember to set things in motion the right way to begin with, which is, as you know, key for communication.
It was just last week, Doreen, that I posted a video about reminders. And in the video, I said, and it really was something that I had never addressed before, even in articles or videos or anything, but it occurred to me that one of the problems we have in management situations is that so many people think if their supervisor reminds them of something, it's a reprimand. But I turned that around in the video and I said, it's not a reprimand, it's a favor, because many of us have so many obligations that if somebody doesn't communicate to us that we're off schedule, that we're nowhere near meeting a deadline, if somebody doesn't remind us of that, it's very unlikely that we're going to meet it. Of course, you and I know the way that reminder is communicated is very important as well, isn't it? The tone and the even the words, but reminders are what keep us on track.
You're spot on. There's a way to do it and there's a way not to do it. And something as simple as, hey, I know this week that we've got to have this project done by Friday. Here's what I'm doing. My understanding is that you're going to do this part together. It'll come together. Is that the same thing that I mean, that's a perfect way to do it. Just bring it together, what you have to do. And they look at it as they're helping you.
And that's not micromanagement, is it? That's
No.
just management.
No, and it's good teamwork, and it's good partnerships. It's good everything.
You work in a highly technical arena. You work with many clients to help them in some complex areas. I noted in your LinkedIn profile that you were an English major. You and I have been aware over the last decade at least, and it's a tone that's increasing. We're hearing people say we don't need the humanities anymore. In fact, I know one well-known university that recently said they were deleting their classics department. Why? Because they didn't see how there was any connection to a job for that. So explain, please, what value being an English major has been to you in your profession.
Well, it stems several areas of management. Obviously, the communication part of it, but we're doing more email now and less speaking to people than we ever have. And if you are, number one, not able to communicate properly, and number two, it comes across as very unprofessional, I mean, we have things like Grammarly that check your grammar and spelling. For heaven's sakes, use it. I worked with a CEO once. I was the president and COO. He was the CEO, who was a law school graduate. He couldn't spell, he couldn't do grammar. I had to go through every single thing he sent out because this was a new company, and at least we look unprofessional and like we were in junior high. I had to go through all his stuff. There's no reason to do that. It all matters, and how you present yourself matters because it reflects on the company. And English and learning to speak well and learning to write well are the basis of any industry, medicine, law, tech, you name it. If you do that well, you're going to do better at whatever it is you're doing.
Those needs are not going away. The need to write clearly, good grammar, good sentence structure. In fact, I've often thought that one of the major problems, and I was in management for 20 years before I became an entrepreneur, I think one of the major problems that exist in most corporations, and I imagine you come across it, is not just bad grammar and botched up English, but it's not being able to write clear instructions even.
Well, and that comes with being able to work on a team, and especially if you're in a management position, if you can't communicate properly what needs to be done, it's not going to be done properly, or if at all, most of the time. It's an ongoing problem for management now because, as you said, they are thinking those skills are not near that as important. And just because you have spell check on your email, it doesn't mean that it's clear. It doesn't mean the grammar's right. Maybe the spelling's right. But what you really need to know is, does everybody understand what it is that you're asking?
And that's
And
where the two-way communication comes in. It's not just issue orders, but find out what's your interpretation of this. Do you understand it? What do you see as the action you're going to take because of this? And so the manager or the supervisor who thinks it's all just hands down and now you do it, that project is not going to do very well, is it?
it is not. A good way to test this, I found, is to bring it down to, it sounds unfortunate unless you're working with really high level people, but if you're writing on about an 8th grade, 9th grade level, it's going to be concise and it's going to be clear. Nobody needs great big words. They just need to understand. And so you don't need to search the thesaurus for what you're writing, because they just need to understand basic ideas of what you're doing. I'm in the middle of writing a book, and one of the chapters is called Working Together Alone. And it's about working with virtual assistants, most of whom are not in the United States, and English is their second language. And they're on the opposite time zone you are. But basically it comes down to this: you have to communicate clearly what they need. And if they mess it up, that's not on them, that's on you, because you didn't communicate clearly. So if you look at someone that has English as a second language, and then you look at how can I tell them exactly what I need so they get it right, if you communicate that way with everybody else, you'll be fine, especially when it goes to really getting stuff done, if it's some kind of a list and a project management thing that you're trying to get done.
Getting back to what you said about spell check, I had one friend. We were emailing each other, I believe, or maybe we were texting each other, and the words from either one of us would get a little bit twisted. And I liked this person's description. It said it's not autocorrect, it's auto-destruct.
Oh, it's so true. I have, dictated things to Siri on my iPhone. And before I looked at it, I had sent it. And I look at it and I'm thinking, I didn't say that. And there was one that was really, really bad. And thank heavens it went to my daughter and no one else. And I thought, oh my gosh, it changed it to this accidentally. So you really need to proofread everything, even if you dictate it. go through it before you send it, because on a text, you cannot take it back.
And if you're back in the workplace, or even if you're not now, because you could email something to someone else, have somebody else check your work. We both know that, my gosh, we see what we wanted to put there and we interpret it the way we think it should be interpreted, but both for correctness and for meaning. It's great to have someone else look over something that you're going to send out. Obviously, you can't do that every time, but with major items, I really think everything's a major item, but I mean, with the ones that are critical for representing your corporation, don't just have one person look at that. It truly takes a team to do it, doesn't it?
It really does. And we've talked a little bit about how have worked with startups for about 25 years now. They always have to write a business plan. But what they put in there is either going to get them investment capital or it's not. So how correct do you want that to be? I mean, you want it perfect. So you need a couple set of eyes on that. And then you need to do 5 or 6 or 8 iterations of that before it really is something you want to send out. Don't just type it up and send it. It's a big deal, and it can make or break you even starting your company or a new product launch or any of those things that affect making money with your company.
There's another tip I would like to throw in there. My graduate professor, when I was earning my Ph.D. at Ohio University, Dr. Paul Bowes, had a statement he repeated fairly often. He said, when you write something, don't look on that as the final copy. He said, look at it in the clear light of another day.
Yeah.
That's very relevant, because what looks good to us today when we're so wrapped up in it may tomorrow, when it's cold print, it might look quite different and need a lot of surgery, right?
Well, there's a saying in the writing world, which is once you've written it, the perfection and the excellence of that product is in the rewrite.
That's
It's
right.
never in that first draft.
In fact, it was James Michener who published so many articles, so many books, who said, I may not be the best writer in the world, but I'm the best rewriter. That's a good guideline for us. Dorine, this is so fascinating, but the clock tells us that we need to wind it down. I know there are our viewers and listeners who want to get in touch with us, so please give us your contact information now.
All righty. You can email me at Rivers, RIVERS, at alpha81, ALPHA81.com.
Thank you. And since you've given your contact information, I'll give mine. The Biz Communication Guy, BIZ. So logically, my website is bizcommunicationguy.com. I invite you to check my website, look at my services for corporations and leaders. Give me a call and let's talk about your communication challenges and problems and how I can help you find solutions to them. Thanks again so much to Dorine Rivers for being with us today. We're very thankful for the contributions that she has made to our discussion. Great to have you on the Biz Communications Show. And keep your phone handy, because we'll have you with us again sometime, Dorine.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you so much.
And thanks to those of us who joined us today on the Biz Communications Show. I'm your host, Bill Lampton, reminding you to be with us next week for another edition of the Biz Communications Show.